Climate tech startups, what works and what doesn't. This is Energy Matters with Claire
and Dan.
Thanks for joining us today. In my research and work, and in Dan's research and work, we have been involved with a lot of different startups over the years, and we've seen a lot of trends across those startups, some really good examples of what people have done and some really bad examples of what people have done in order to scale their companies operationally and beyond. So we're going to try to address some of the things that we think are continual trends that have either helped startups or hurt startups. And we'll probably end up doing this in 2 episodes. The things that we're going to talk about in today's episode have to do with leadership and culture, market sizing and go-to-market strategy, product velocity and direction, and unit economics. So Dan, I know that you had thought about Enphase as being a company with great leadership and culture. Tell me why those leaders had a great culture.
So I love to say that, but I do have to say first that if there's ever an episode where you should listen to Claire and give a skeptical eye to Dan, this is it. Because as everyone who knows me knows, I do not have a vision, head for, whatever you want to call it, business. So I feel like I am the happiest passenger, cheerleader, rooter for my students and friends as they do startups, but I am pretty blanking clueless. And so my experiences are super fun. I've been involved in quite a few startups, but always somebody else had to carry the heavy lifting. So with that kind of disclaimer, we'll talk about Enphase. It's a company I was involved with in the beginning. I am not involved now, so there's no advocacy, stock, kickback, blah, blah, blah. So for me, the Enphase story has a really simple and really powerful starting point. 2 guys came into my office one day, very much unannounced, and they said, hey, we have an idea for an energy company. And without getting into the technical details at this point, they basically said, why are people in the solar field so stupid? And then my eyes got really large, and they said, we have an idea for a far better product to make alternating current AC power out. I won't go into the details of what it was, but they said, we can do this in a way that is better resilience, better redundancy, doesn't have some of the faults in current systems. And we are just curious why this hasn't happened before. And I've looked at them and said, well, sounds good to me, but I don't know why it has happened before. You tell me how your idea is going to work. And what they did was to upset the apple cart in a really good way. They stuck to their guns. They hired people who filled in areas where they didn't do things well. They wrote out some very, very lean years, something that I think is pretty standard. And they just wrote out the challenges because they were committed to both getting it done, but also supporting the people inside their company that brought new ways of thinking that made the overall plan better.
So I think what you're saying is that they've had, clear roles, there was accountability, there was mutual trust, all of those things and more, right?
I think that's there. I mean, there were some times when there seemed like, at least to me as the science advisor, there were some overlaps in roles, but I think it was also at a point when they were really getting buffeted from the outside. And because one of them was more on the marketing side and one of them was more on the hardware side, they not only bounced off each other well, but then they brought in a real technical guru who drove the lab team in a way that was needed, but also was not belittling. They really supported their employees as they brought new ideas to the table.
Yeah, and I think I'd add that the companies that I've been a part of where they've been the most successful are companies where the CEO doesn't have a huge ego. So from a leadership and culture perspective, well, it's hard, but it's possible. What I think it's really important for anybody in the C-suite to understand what they're good at and what they're not good at, and
what's a C-suite? Just to be clear.
The CEO, which is the chief executive officer, the COO, chief operating officer, anybody that's in a senior management role. The folks that I know in our field that have been the most successful don't have a huge ego and have agreed to understand this is what I do know and this is what I don't know, and I'm going to hire smart people around me who know better than I. I would also argue CleanCapital has great leadership in John Powers and Tom Byrne, friends of ours, and I think that they have a great culture. They nurture the founding team's values. They are clear about roles. They have a lot of accountability, and there's mutual trust. So that's the first one in our list.
Tell me what they do so that the audience kind of hears not just their need people, but what is it that their product needed and that their personalities or styles supported.
Sure. So CleanCapital finances solar and storage all over the country. They have financing from a big insurance company, Manulife, and they have been doing large utility scale solar. And actually, full disclosure, they're financing the work of Sunrock Distributed Generation, which we're doing smaller, messy middle, sort of 150 kilowatt to 5 megawatt installations. But they've been around for over 10 years, and they've been focused on serving a part of the market where you can take funding from an entity that has very little risk tolerance in Manulife and getting to a point where a huge big insurance company can get comfortable with financing solar.
So I'm going to jump in for a second because I think this might be one of the points that our perspectives on climate tech startups differ, and I'm hoping that'll come out here. And that is the companies that approach me or we think about and incubate in my lab are almost always companies where there is some clear data science or technological innovation that we're pushing. But what I hear you talking about here for CleanCapital is they're just good operators in a space that needs it, and they know how to move money to the problem. Is that fair or too simple?
Too simple. It's financial strategies and finding financial solutions that nobody else has used before. So no,
but is there a unique thing they're doing differently, or are they just doing better in a space that needs good actors?
They are certainly doing the latter. They have been meeting the energy needs of businesses and schools and nonprofits. They have expertise in what they call small scale solar and energy storage, and they've garnered a huge energy portfolio over time. They've invested more than 1.5 billion, and they have more than 450 megawatts under management, but they have not created any widget, so to say, but they've created financial innovation. And frankly, almost every company I've been a part of is a financial innovator. They're not necessarily technology innovators.
Got it. I think geeks are us on my end of the equation here. So I'm always looking for that.
Yeah. So maybe that would be a good segue into product velocity and direction. So when I say that, if I don't mean to be business school jargony, but basically what I mean by that is products almost always take longer to develop than the path to revenue can support. Right? So you're spending a whole lot of time in the lab trying to create something, or you're spending a whole lot of time developing a group of people that can support the financial innovation. Almost all companies underestimate the cost and time needed to reach commercial scale. Product roadmaps lack the necessary sequence of steps to progress logically. They haven't figured out how to stage roadmap changes. There's scalability issues. Like, even if you are able to produce something, are you able to service it well? Do you have any examples from that perspective, from the technology perspective?
Boy, I sure do. But it's a failed one, so maybe some of the lessons down the line are less positive. So I was visiting friends over on the peninsula near Stanford, and they said, you really got to go through and talk to this company that no longer exists. So that's a clear one. And it's called MiaSolé. And MiaSolé was a thin film solar, meaning their idea was, why do we need to have a thick piece of glass, our solar stuff, leads, connectors, wires, then metal on the back, etc. It's a big, thick sandwich when you only need a really thin bit. And their innovation was very low cost, so-called reel-to-reel, basically like a big movie projector that could roll these things out. And they had a great product. I actually have a few samples lying around. We'll put a picture of one of the ones I still have in my home on the website. And they kept saying, well, we've got a neat product today. And I'd say, oh, this is so cool. Let's build it into a roofing tiles, or let's put it on the skin of a car. And they kept saying, no, Dan, you're just too impetuous, too impatient. We have a core product. We want to be able to roll this out for large amounts of roofing material, specifically for warehouses. And they stuck to their guns and stuck to their guns. And I'll never know if they were right or wrong, because what happened is, the end, they actually got bought out by a Chinese company that closed them down to eliminate a competitor. So we don't know the final answer, but I felt like at each step of the way, they stuck with their guns. I wish their guns had been successful, but they really said, we're going to make one product. We're not going to get diverted by flashy sidekicks. And I think that they viewed my enthusiasm as good, but my willingness to go down these side paths as someone who was not disciplined enough to run their company.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, so that gets back to the CEO and ego of senior management. Absolutely. The next one I want to share is sort of market sizing and go-to-market strategy. So those I link. So either a company starts and there isn't enough demand for what they're building, they're creating a widget that nobody wants, or the go-to-market strategy doesn't address potential challenges. Like sometimes, almost always, startups overestimate total addressable market, for example. Founders often think that the problem that they're trying to solve is something that everybody in the whole world cares about. I have some great examples for that, Dan, but are there any that you would like to share?
I got to hear one.
I would argue,
again, I don't even know what some of those words mean.
Oh, come on.
It's so true.
What do you not understand?
You business people go to market, this and that. I'm just listening. So go on. I want to hear.
Go to market is really like, do you have what it takes to be able to sell the product or service that you're trying to sell? And do you have a strategy that will help you find the people who want what you're selling? And do you have the team to find that group? So in this case, I'm actually going to bring up Fermata Energy, which is a vehicle-to-grid startup that ended up folding. I was the COO for a short time, a year. And the idea is actually a beautiful idea, is that in electric vehicles, there are batteries. And essentially, it's the idea that you think about battery storage on wheels, right? So why not, when your electric vehicle is fully charged, discharge that to the grid? And we could have a whole, podcast just on that. But I think one of the main reasons that Fermata failed is that there wasn't enough demand for the charger that they were trying to build.
So Claire, you described Fermata. I sort of get it. I sort of don't get it. But vehicle to grid in its simplest terms means what?
Okay, so the idea is you've got an electric vehicle. It has a battery in it, right? For a bunch of hours during the day, that vehicle and its battery are doing nothing. So if that battery in that vehicle is charged up, why not sell the electricity from that battery back to the grid? It's actually a very elegant, very lovely idea. It's the idea that you can have a bi-directional energy solution. You can both pull electricity from the grid to power your battery in your vehicle and sell electricity from your vehicle back to the grid and make money by selling electricity back to the grid.
And I think this might be one of the examples that I hope we'll come back to. It's my favorite concept, but maybe my least favorite acronym or term, and that's prosumers. You are both a producer and a consumer of a product. Sounds weird in terms of the word, but it really sounds like the energy world we're moving into. And there wasn't enough demand because utilities were disinterested, which we might get into later on. That's a big theme of mine. Or because customers themselves didn't see this as a cool addition to just having an EV to drive around?
Well, certainly customers didn't understand it. That's number one. Number two, utilities hate vehicle to grid for a variety of reasons. They don't understand it, and they don't know how it's going to impact their grid. And so they pushed it away tooth and nail, barring a few pilots with Sacramento Municipal Utility District. And the only car that actually was able to perform that technology was a Nissan Leaf. And even Nissan was having trouble figuring out how to use it. And so it was a brilliant idea, really brilliant idea. But the go-to-market strategy really wasn't there. And the size of the market was vastly overestimated based on reality.
And just to be clear, from the geeky analyst side, not only are utilities to blame for either not understanding or not wanting to kind of literally, pun intended, share the power with these companies, but analysts like me were part of the problem. Because 10 years ago, even though your car is generally your second largest purchase after your home, so finding a way to use it for the 23 hours a day that you're not driving it on average sounds super sensible.
Super smart, yeah.
It's like the most duh moment you could possibly get. This is like a Simpsons level, managing a power plant issue. What happened was nobody was willing to push the story so that car manufacturers were compelled to have their vehicles ready to do this. Very few even today. I mean, the Ford F-150 Lightning can do it. Remarkably few others for a circuit that costs on the order of $20. It's not an addition that would make any difference. But analysts at universities, at think tanks, thought this was going to really confuse things if vehicles were being used in this way. Plus, they didn't have that much confidence in the batteries, which has also been proven wrong. So I do feel like not only the analytics, but the business types were aligned not to make this work, which I guess goes back to the old adage, the Upton Sinclair. It's very difficult to convince someone of something when their livelihood depends on the not understanding it.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah. Okay, so thus far we've talked about three things. One, leadership and culture with Enphase as an example. Two, product velocity and direction with MiaSolé as an example. Three, market sizing and go-to-market strategy with Fermata Energy as an example. And the last one I think we're going to talk about today is unit economics and the revenue model. And what I mean by that is, what are customers willing to pay, right? That's a huge part of any technology, right? Not only does anybody care about the widget I'm making, but what are they willing to pay for that widget? And does it cost me less to make that widget than what customers are willing to pay? For sure, and I hear this from technologists all the time, is that, my cost structure will be lots cheaper and easier as product scales reach to price parity. But you got to get over the hump to reach that parity, right? And then the other part of unit economics, of course, is like, what's the cost to sell? So what are people willing to pay? What are people willing to sell? What's the cost to sell, rather? And sure, if you're at a huge scale, things are cheaper, but how do you get there, right? So what's a good example of unit economics and a revenue model where somebody's done actually a good job or a bad job?
So I'll give you one that I feel like is a good job. And this is a company that does exist today, and I do have founder shares in it. So whether you want to discount that or not, and it's called Renew Financial. And unlike what I said before, that I typically gravitate to companies that have a technology widget, I was attracted to Renew Financial for two reasons. One is that it was birthed as an idea in Berkeley, and I was part of the team that wrote one of the early papers. And the scale up was one that I saw in their financial model, something that was so wonderfully simple. And so in sort of super short version, what Renew Financial said was, hey, cities or public-private partnerships, a bank supporting a city, frequently lend money to individuals or businesses so that they can do upgrades. They can fix the sidewalk. They can fix the sewer lines, all kinds of things. And so what the founders said, and it was founded in the mayor's office in the city of Berkeley, which is actually kind of a fun side story in itself. And they said, why don't we do the same thing for energy? That was it. That was the whole model initially. Renew Financial had a very unfortunate initial name. It was called Berkeley First.
I remember that with
Berkeley
Cisco DeVries.
Out of Berkeley.
Outside of Berkeley. But what they did in terms of unit economics and revenue model was what exactly?
It was super simple. They said, we are going to copy the model that's already in existence to lend people money to do upgrades in their city, and we're going to extend it so that you can do energy efficiency upgrades in your home or business. And only after you do that can you also get sort of the second part of a loan to do solar. Some people just did efficiency, some did both. And the innovation was to work with the local municipality so that your Renew Financial loan was, quote unquote, superior to your mortgage, meaning it had to be paid back first, and the payments could transfer when the property changed hands. And they really leaned into existing financial structures in terms of these loans that go out already. And they basically just made money available as easily as possible to do efficiency and solar. That was it. And that worked. So, Claire, I've sort of sung the praises of Renew Financial as a clever idea built on a very standard platform.
Yep.
How does that sing to you? Do you see a different view of them? Because ultimately what happened is this model worked well in Australia for residential property. In the US, it really only caught on for commercial property, because if you were a really clever homeowner, you could probably get a little better rate by going to a bank yourself, but there's so much extra work in it that a lot of people on the commercial side just use them as their clearinghouse.
So I actually would say that Renew Financial and what we call property assessed clean energy now is built on a simple idea, but is actually incredibly complicated. And I would actually argue that the unit economics don't work well. And what I mean by that is you need to, municipality by municipality, get them to change their tax code to allow for this attachment to a house or to a commercial building and have that be connected and be paid before your property taxes are. And so I found it a close to impossible model to work. I mean, we tried in Baltimore City to get legislation passed, and you really have to go municipality by municipality. Now, obviously, it has worked. We've got CleanCapital and Jessica over there who's done a wonderful job. But, I wouldn't argue that that was a great unit economics play.
So that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Because I viewed it as a good version of this, because while there was a lot of work to get it done, and you're right, behind the scenes, there's a lot of messy stuff to be done, it built on something that had a long tradition of working, where people are comfortable taking out these loans. So that's why I viewed this as a unit economics that, while difficult to do in reality, built on something people understood.
So this has been a super interesting episode for me, Dan, because I think where you come from and where I come from are just so incredibly different. Like I'm constantly thinking about operationally, how are we going to actually be able to execute that? And you're thinking about the idea. And
Absolutely.
And it's super interesting. You're the scientist, I'm the business person. And I think the more we have conversations, the better for everybody.
Boy, that sounds good to me. We better do another one, and we still have most of your checklist to go when we come back to Startup Culture in another segment.
Yep. So this is Energy Matters with Claire and Dan. Please check out energymatters.world, and thanks for listening.